to compile a list of frequently asked questions or statements that you would consider to be inappropriate, where would you actually start?
Quite common is, will your disability or your condition kill you early? So are you about to die? Is it going to kill you? Is it something that will lead to an early death? Seems to be quite a common one. No, it won't kill me early. I'm probably not at any higher risk of death than anybody else. Are you able to have a physical relationship or a romantic involvement? They're fascinated by the idea of people with disabilities being able to have any kind of sexual relationship. I think people find that fascinating. I've never quite understood why that's quite so interesting, but that's probably certainly in the top 3 or 4 questions. How did it happen is another one that people like to sort of do, and then they sort of go, oh, I know someone else that's got a disability, so you probably know them, because apparently we all know each other and all are part of some sort of club or society.
I guess so. I hadn't actually thought about those particular. Oh, I know somebody else with that. I have heard people say in response to me disclosing my autism, they've said, oh, well, everybody's got that nowadays, which is
quite...
like
it's a fashion statement, yeah.
Yeah, those the sort of blanket statements. A few of the things that I face have had people make comments along the lines of, well, you look too normal to be autistic, or you don't look autistic. And I know that this is one of those things that really winds people up who are also autistic. Well, what are you supposed to look like? And other things that I get is the assumption that I lack empathy. A lot of these things that I get said to me are based around what people think they know about autism. I don't think I've ever really had anybody think that I'm good at maths. Nobody's ever actually asked me about my life expectancy. But actually, unlike you, my life expectancy would be, statistically speaking, lower than the average. People who are autistic who don't have a learning disability, who manage to achieve some kind of autonomy, are more prone to substance abuse of anything full stop, self-harm. We're higher risk of mental health conditions. We're higher risk of committing suicide. We're also at a higher risk of being unemployed, therefore it creates poverty, because if we live in poverty, we're more likely to have poor health and all the things that go with it. Now, with people who are autistic who have a learning disability, their life expectancy is limited quite often by other people. And that happens when you've got what we call comorbid conditions, like a learning disability, like epilepsy's higher rates of epilepsy in autistic people, neglect, and not getting access to health screenings the way other people might be. And of course, things go undetected for a bit longer, and quite often till they're beyond the point of no return, essentially. So yeah, I'm very lucky to have lived to be as old as I am. I don't get too many people these days who seem to think that it's only boys. It does surprise people to meet an adult, because all the education that they've had, or all the awareness that they've had has been around children, because predominantly autism is the TV documentaries and things like that quite often still do focus on children, and quite often they're children with unique gifts. And that's another thing. People think that we've all got savant abilities. And no, we don't. A lot of the questions that we get asked are based on myths and misconceptions. Is that something that you find?
I think so. Like you say, TV programs that they've watched, things that are on the news, things that might be in the newspapers or similar media outlets and so on. So yeah, I would say one of the biggest challenges as a person that has a disability and also a disability that isn't going to go anywhere. So I'm not going to suddenly wake up next week and it's going to be gone, which is something else that people sort of, how can it be cured? What can be done for you? There isn't. This is it. This is what I have and will always have. But a lot of it, I think, that the misconceptions or the misunderstandings they have isn't necessarily their fault. It's the things that are around them. It's the way society has conditioned them, and it's the perceptions that they've gained of a certain set of circumstances or a situation based on the media input that they're exposed to.
Take disability out of it a minute. We do get asked questions that might seem incredibly insensitive and really inappropriate. How do we handle them? And what sort of strategies have you developed to handle those situations that basically you ask yourself, why are you actually asking me this question? And what gives you the right to think that you can do so?
So I think there are different ways in which you can learn to cope with that, because that's something you do have to learn to cope with. You know, in the same way that the disability I have isn't going to go away, neither is other people's curiosities or ignorance in some cases around that going to go away either. It's always going to be there. And I think that there's a couple of things in terms of how you deal with it. For me, the first one is learning to acknowledge that is always going to be the case. There is always going to be somebody that needs to ask a question, even if it's for their own reasons. So you have to kind of accept that. And then I think there's different ways of responding to it. So I quite often have a sort of humorous approach to dealing with the questions or dealing with a query. I think I sometimes, probably on a deeper level, I probably use humour to deal with that. It almost becomes a defence mechanism for the sort of constant questions and queries that people have. I can be quite rude sometimes if I feel that the person is doing it to mock me, they're doing it to make themselves feel better. It's almost like a bullying thing, or they're doing it because they think it's funny or entertaining. Then actually what you might unleash in those circumstances is the sarcastic or humorous approach, where actually, you know, I have on occasions been very sarcastic and really probably made somebody feel particularly bad for asking a question, which isn't always the right way to deal with it. But again, I think you have to accept it's a pressure cooker that you're in. Those questions, those queries are going to come at you every single day in some instances. So there are going to be days when you deal with it better than others. You're going to be in a better position some days to deal with that. So sometimes there's the humorous approach and the sarcasm approach, if that's how you sort of feel that this situation might be best to be diffused. There's a direct answer. So there's you've asked this question, here's the answer. But sometimes I sort of feel, well, I want to get to the bottom of why you're asking this. Why do you need this information? You know, do you need this information for a valid reason? So is it a health and safety related question about how I might manage some stairs, how I might get on or off of a train or something like this? You know, is there a logical reason why you need this answer and why that information will be valuable to you? Is it just that you're inquisitive and you're wanting to broaden your horizons and get more knowledge? Or are you just asking because you're wanting to know, you're nosy, you're curious, whatever we sort of put that label on? So I think probably within a matter of seconds of somebody asking that situation, I have to sort of almost do an environmental analysis of where we are. So are we in a public place? Are we on a train? You know, what's the setting that we're in? Who's the person that's asking? Are they a person in authority? Are they somebody there that's there to try and assist me? You know, what's their reason for doing it? Or actually, are they just, they've had one too many beers on a Friday night and they want to show off in front of their friends or try and be clever in some way? For me, I like the ones that are trying to be clever, because I always see it as a duel, if you like, a challenge to see which one of us is actually, in a better position in terms of being able to answer that. So I think there's a couple of things. You have to understand the intent behind the person inquiring or asking that question. Is their intent a genuine one? You know, are they just genuinely needing to know this information? Are they asking because they genuinely want to see if there's something they can do to help you or offer assistance or make your life easier in some way? Or are they actually they're just ignorant, and that question is coming out of ignorance rather than a position of good?
I suppose it's useful then to understand the motive behind these questions.
I think so, yeah. I mean, for example, I was in the supermarket getting some essential supplies a few days ago. It's the first time I'd left the house in almost 2 weeks, because obviously we're in the lockdown situation with the coronavirus. Yesterday, somebody actually asked, can you reach that from the shelves? Can I help you? And what is it because they could see that I was obviously trying to do something, and there was a task in my mind, and actually in a very kind and polite way said, can I, let me help with that, if that would be okay. I didn't mean any offence. I just could see that you were struggling, and I'd like to try and help. So actually, in that sort of scenario, that's fine.
You're very good at describing that. How other people, you get to understand the motive behind the things that people are saying, and that can be really hard for autistic people to be able to do. It is a learnable skill, but it does take time, and it's easy to get caught out. So when I'm asked questions like that, sometimes it's been difficult in the past to know whether somebody's genuinely, which is what you're saying, are they genuinely interested? They're genuinely concerned? Do they genuinely want to find out? Or are they just trying to make themselves look great? Are they trying to make me look stupid? And that's a really tricky one for autistic people to get their heads around. I have to say, I can't really remember being questioned about my sex life.